Welcome to day 3 of the Øredev debrief week. This week we get a chat with a Øredev 2023 keynote speaker each day, perfect for keeping the doctor away. Today I'll talk to Natasha Bard about long-lived code. The discussion connects to many topics in our keynote, so consider this a great appetizer if you haven't seen the keynote itself yet. And as usual, links to the keynote and everything else we talk about are in the show notes. Enjoy. Yeah, welcome to the smaller stage, Natasha.
Thanks, Cozy.
Yeah, great keynote.
Yeah, thank
Like
you.
I said, it was really interesting. There was a lot of nodding in my line, including from me.
Yeah.
And I should say that we will of course link the keynote and everything else when we release this as a podcast, so people can look at it.
Yeah.
So we don't need to summarize everything, but we can refer to it. Yeah, it was funny because I thought I was disagreeing for a while when we were talking about the building blocks and picking stuff. But I think what was really going on was that I was confusing, picking blocks and owning your core competencies.
Yeah.
Because that's a whole different thing, I guess.
Yeah, but I think the whole concept, it's a bit provoking, right?
Yeah.
Because our nature as developers and as engineers with this engineering mindset is that our first inclination is that there's a problem and it needs to be solved, and it needs to be solved in the quote-unquote best way.
Yeah.
The problem is that it takes some pragmatism and some humility and some maturity to figure out, how to not let perfect get in the way of good. And I would even argue that, perfect is maybe also a delusion in reality, right?
Absolutely.
But more and more, I think we have to keep in mind this bigger picture, this end goal that, until we have gotten a solution in the hands of someone, a human, that and it's having a positive impact in them in some way, we haven't really achieved what we're really trying to do.
No, that's very true. And I think also my perspective is, I guess, deeply colored by working a lot on the front end and full stack web development, where I feel like there are tendencies to want to pick many pieces very often, and perhaps even a little bit early. But I suppose that's kind of maybe a slightly unique problem to web.
Well, I think to some degree it is. I think also to some degree it might also be related to the evolution of kind of software architecture design. Previously in the past, there was the base assumption was that we built our solutions in this very monolithic way, and now we kind of understand that for the large, in a bigger picture, that's not really the best. But the sort of the flip side of that is what I call microservice theater, right? And that ends up with this environment where you actually have a lot of different components that do lots of small things.
Yeah.
And so you have that, and then you sort of add in this I can solve that problem in a better way, and my thing is going to be the next great thing. And then it's I think there's an XKCD about this, right? There's 10 different competing standards for this. We need one to rule them all, and now there's 11 different competing standards for this, right?
Yeah.
But I do think that the problem manifests itself, I guess, a bit more in web. Yeah,
it's somehow it's even more appealing there to build your own pieces and generalize them and stuff like that as well.
And also in my experience, this inclination of someone new starts on the project, and the first thing is no, that's not the we need to change this out for the one that I know.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah, there was something associated to that.
It's been a long day.
Yeah, it has.
I was actually really, really pleased to see so much engagement at the end of a very, very, very long day.
Yeah, it's intense, but it's good.
Yeah.
Have you had the time to watch any other presentations?
Yeah, I've watched sessions, I think in pretty much all the sessions except for the one right before my talk.
Yeah.
I actually really appreciated this one. I can't remember the name of the session, but it was by the Olympian, the handball player who the lessons learned from because my experience, she works as an agile coach now. My experience is that usually when people try to take these sports metaphors and apply them to software development, it just falls so flat, But this was really not so much about how to think of software development as a team sport and all of that, but it was how to challenge yourself to be better.
Yeah.
And I really, really like that aspect of it because I'm really into this understanding that software development is ultimately a human process.
Yeah.
Where we're also creating something that is used not by machines. At the end of the day, we're solving a problem for humans, either directly or indirectly. I really like that keeping this human-centric view, I think.
Yeah,
is
it
super important.
gives a much better focus or weighting to things. I recovered my lost thread. I really liked that you reminded us that software outlives you.
Yes.
Because I feel that that's something that's really lost. I think it's true very often, but we lose track of it all the time. It's like, it's just a temporary thing.
Yes.
Especially this horrible part over here.
Yeah.
But no, it's going to outlive you.
Yeah, and I think you kind of remember that whatever you're leaving behind, it's like you might leave it behind, but it still exists for someone else.
Yeah.
Right.
And the more it outlives you, the better it is, the more value it has provided.
Yeah.
We had a support request once for an integration with a system of ours. So it was written by a third party, and they actually sent along the code because they didn't understand. I guess we produced a new error or something like that, and it was basically integrating with an old XML SOAP service, and was like pasting 4 strings together and just sending it. And so this is not very simple. And I noticed that there was a header to it, and it was like 11 years old.
Yeah.
So someone wrote that once, and it worked ever since. and people could argue up and down, you should make this better, more general, or find a nicer solution. But sometimes pasting 4 strings together gets the job done for a long time.
Sometimes it does. I'm pretty sure. I remember struggling with a problem in my talk. I talked about this embedded Linux application from a long time ago, right? And I remember there's some comments in there with a particular problem that I solved that I'm pretty sure I wrote a comment saying that if this still exists in a year, someone owes me a donut. I'm pretty sure it probably still exists now. I need a lot of donuts.
And suddenly the donuts started arriving.
Exactly.
No.
Yeah. But it's a little bit horrifying in some ways to think, because if you think of yourself and how much better you are with, creating software over the years, even I think we've all done it, right? You go back a year later or 2 years later, looking at code that you've written before, and you're like, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
To think that okay, someone's doing that with code that you wrote 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, the horror.
Sorry.
No, it's in a good way. We don't think about it often enough, I think.
No.
And I wonder how early is it meaningful to try and think about stuff like that? Can you bring it? When I'm looking at the empty file and thinking about how to bring up the web page, is that too early, or is it never too early?
I don't know. I think it can be too early. In the game industry, we would, talk a lot about this pitfall of premature optimization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That you're so worried about how to make this particular piece of code work in the most performant way in that scenario that you kind of forget to make the entire thing.
Yeah.
Or you get hyper focused on that and you kind of forget that
Oh yeah.
And I think you can also, if you get too stuck in these bigger picture things, you can also be prone to the same sort of thing. And then you actually get the same problem that I actually talked about, but just from a different way, that you delay actually solving the problem and creating the value in the end.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I think it can be a bit too early because it is also, it's a science, but it's also an art, and some things aren't going to work out, right?
No.
And so I think you have to, it also kind of comes with your experience and your maturity on okay, when should I work on kind of professionalizing what I'm doing, keeping the bigger picture in mind, but also remembering that okay, but this is going to outlive me, and this solution, I understand the requirements we have now, but how might I make it so that it can be adapted in the future and integrated with, and I'm making something that if my project and everything is successful, it will exist perhaps after I'm not working here, right? And so let me make something that I'm going to be proud as, hand it on to the next person.
Yeah, this was good in the context. Yeah, in a way, I guess it's sometimes the big picture that changes before your code does, and I guess it all kind of falls back to being thoughtful about what pieces you pick and how you pick them and how large you make the pieces that you build yourself.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting way of considering it.
I think this whole thing around your software outliving you is also. It's also, to some degree, it manifests itself in that we have, SaaS business models. We have software that's like you don't make it once and then ship it and that's that.
Yeah.
Like it needs to like be constantly like updated and maintained and things like that. Like the same evolution happened in the video game industry as well, right? Like it used to be like, you know, you worked really, really hard and you made like the golden image that was burned onto a CD and then like you're done.
Yep.
And that's not how it works now, right? And I think that's actually one reason why the industry has struggled to catch up in its maturity, because now suddenly, like, this needs to be like a maintainable piece of software that exists over a long period of time and can be updated. So that requires like a maturity in your development and your approach and your practice, and to some degree, different trade-offs.
Of course.
Well.
I mean, if you shipped it once, then you had to put a lot of focus on, that piece working at that time and keep working like that. And
also, like, nowadays I work a lot, like, in my current job, like in public sector software solutions, right? And in Denmark, at least, like our public infrastructure it's so digitalized, but it's not like, here's one version of something that's just like sitting on a mainframe somewhere. In a basement in Copenhagen, and it will just be there for 30 years anymore. That's not how it works, right? Like, it's also software that needs to be able to be maintained and updated and delivered, and the implications of it not working for even a short period of time are, like, catastrophic, right?
Yeah.
And it's a totally different, like, it's a totally different mindset.
Yeah. Do you think we'll change a lot in the near future, how we deal with software like that has to live for a long time and hang around in clouds and stuff like that?
I think to some degree we'll probably get better and more experienced, but I think like in how to do it in an efficient way.
Yeah.
But I think like although we have a lot of fundamental knowledge on how to do good continuous like improvement, development, and delivery, the reality is that the execution in most organizations is still, in my view, relatively immature. Mm-hmm. So I think it will be a big chunk of time where we continue to kind of work on how to do that in actually a good and meaningful way.
Yes. So many tools feel way too technical. Aren't people talking about normal developers shouldn't have to know Kubernetes or stuff like that? That should be sorted out in a better way in general.
They shouldn't have to know Kubernetes in great detail. They should have some fundamental understanding of what it is and how it works, right? But of course, like there are cloud architects and DevOps engineers, and they should know it extremely well, right?
Definitely. Like, cloud agnosticism is interesting as well.
That one is. I always like. It's something I really, really believe in, but it's something that always. Even if the majority of people nowadays tend to agree, there's still always people who kind of twitch every time.
Of course. But because it feels like it's going against what's optimal once you've picked one or something like that, I guess. Yeah. I mean, I feel like there are similar problems in, front end, the whole architecture or build stack. Basically, once you have pulled in a build system for your front end stuff, and you have Node.js running, and we can pull in this little piece as well that does this.
And suddenly it's to like spread.
And then you try to upgrade, like you said.
And sometimes you have to like. Sometimes the trade-off is worth it. Yeah. But you need to do it with open eyes. Yeah. And understand what is your exit strategy, what is your plan B. It's not that I would say like never ever do it, but like as a general rule, I really believe in, for example, cloud agnosticism and understand like what is the trade-off with every decision you're making. Yeah,
I'm curious how some of our projects at work how they would look different if we had an active discussion about what pieces to pick from the start rather than this is similar to this one, let's start from that template and go on from there.
But oftentimes those sorts of things, there's no structured discussion about that from the beginning. It just sort of happens. It happens
exactly
over time, and then before you know it, you've worked yourself into a corner.
Let's just get started.
Exactly.
But it's also maybe part of thinking about a little bit more long term. Maybe spend a few minutes there in the start.
At least have a few minutes with like, okay, what are the basic, like, what are the boundaries of the playing field here? Like, what are the basic principles we're going to work with, and then try different things to see what works within that. But I think that also comes to like maturity as an engineering practice, and that in a lot of ways, I mean, I think software development and delivery, yes, there's a lot more maturity as an engineering practice than there was previously, but I still think like it's rather immature in a lot of ways and still needs to continue to evolve.
Yeah. So you worked in many different layers when it comes to software stacks and hardware and various engineering disciplines.
And a lot of different industries as well.
Yeah, that too. So what do you pick up from each of them, or what do?
I mean, it's just different stuff, right? Like when you're working, like when I kind of worked with the company that made the fiber optic spectrometers, right? That was like I really had like a respect for how inflexible and difficult the whole like hardware manufacturing process, you know, and as the software part of it, you often kind of get stuck with, we'll fix it in software. That's okay. That shouldn't work. We'll fix it in software, and that's annoying. But whenever you see the end-to-end thing, you kind of see why that is, because you know the beauty and the flexibility and sometimes the difficulty from software comes from what I said. Like we're not bounded just by these concrete laws of our physical world. I mean, yes, like how fast can computers like run and stuff like that, but at the same time, like that also gives us a flexibility that doesn't exist. And I think that's one of the things that really that I took away from that. And then in that job also, that's also where I worked on the custom version of a spectrometer that was that was used in the L-Cross mission with NASA. And that was like the whole like, oh God, this really better work, because if this doesn't work, then it's like, you know, it's millions of dollars for like a big explosion no one's going to see.
No pressure.
And that's a different sort of thing. I'm not a big fan of that kind of stress.
No, I can't.
And then video games, I just like that was a totally different thing, because that's where I really started to realize like, oh, wow, like sometimes the most brilliant people, whenever it comes to like kind of technical knowledge, can be some of the most immature whenever it comes to like collaborating and exercising engineering discipline, right? And like how you work with that, right? Because sometimes you need those people, but they can also be kind of toxic to the overall development. How do you work with them and construct it? Like there was a lot like there in that regard. And I think like now, you know, I work you know, for KMD, where we develop and deliver solutions to like, you know, digital government, like the municipalities in Denmark, central government, also energy and utility and the financial sector. And I think the biggest thing I've learned in this job is like really this element of like your software will outlive you, and you see how old some of these solutions are and they're still working. And the way that like as a Danish citizen, like I can't live my life as a Danish citizen without interacting with some solution that we make. Like the gravity, the responsibility, the opportunities that we have as software developers in this digital world to impact like how society works, like that's something that's really meaningful. But I've learned to take that more seriously. So I think I kind of pick up different things and different experiences, and also being in companies that are in very different stages of the journey, right? Like when I was at Unity, that was like the startup to like scale up, like the unicorn, you know, rocket ship kind of growth journey that I was super lucky and very privileged to be a player in, and very happy that I had it early enough in my career to capitalize on it. But like my current organization, it's like, you know, the company, we celebrated our 50th anniversary last year. Like very few software companies are actually able to achieve having 50 years of history behind them and doing meaningful work. And that's its own thing.
Yeah, that's a big achievement. Yeah. Really. Is there anything there from the larger organizations that you think smaller organizations should know about or should have picked up? Or is it all just totally different worlds?
I think they're just totally different. I mean, I really believe that like larger and smaller organizations have kind of advantages and different and disadvantages. I think they can learn things from one another. I mean, smaller organizations, I think, can often struggle a little bit from like, you know, just not having the experience usually on how to do things, how to be successful, like not knowing what they don't know, as I mentioned in the talk, and maybe that can happen also in an organizational context. Larger organizations can often kind of get stuck in this, like, we've always done it this way, so we just do it that way because that's what everyone is used to, or they don't, necessarily challenge themselves. They maybe have some more trouble adapting to change.
Yeah, we have the pieces we built a long time ago here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's all interesting pieces.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to wrap up.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you.
Tack för att just du lyssnar på Kodsnack. Om du vill stödja oss, varför inte tipsa en bekant om podden? Eller lämna en recension i till exempel iTunes eller något annat ställe där det går att sätta betyg på poddar. Du kan också stödja oss genom att köpa oss en kopp kaffe på Coffee, ko-fi.com/kodsnack. Alla pengar går direkt till att göra podden bättre och trevligare. Du kan också komma och hänga i vår Slack-kanal. Länk finns på kodsnack.se, precis som alla andra länkar och all annan info kopplat till varje avsnitt. Sist men inte minst finns det också en länk till vår Spreadshop-butik där du kan köpa tröjor och andra prylar med Kodsnacktryck. Återigen, tusen tack för att du lyssnar. Vi hörs.
Let me put it this way, Mr. Raymer. The 9000 series is the most reliable computer ever made. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information. We are all, by any practical definition of the words, foolproof and incapable of error.